Chapter 1. We Were Warned. On September 29, 1959, Nikita Khrushchev, premier of the Soviet Union, warned, "Your children's children will live under communism. You Americans are so gullible. No, you won't accept communism outright, but we will keep feeding you small doses of socialism until you will finally wake up and find you already have communism. We will not have to fight you. We will so weaken your economy until you will fall like overripe fruit into our hands." Emphasis added. On January 3, 1973, the military passenger plane I was on taxied up to the passenger terminal at Norton Air Force Base in Northern California. There were approximately 250 Army, Navy, and Marine servicemen on board the plane, all returning from the Vietnam War. Why do I remember the date so well? Because the date we returned home, often called our rotation date, was a very important date for all of us. We were all conscious of the fact that many who went over to fight for our country did not return. As the aircraft was taxiing, the officer in charge came on over the intercom and said, "America has changed. I suggest all of you change into civilian clothes as soon as you get your bags. Do not go off the base in your uniforms. There are thousands of protesters waiting for you. America has changed. Good luck, and thank you for your service. Welcome home." I had no one waiting for me. Many men did. Wives, children, moms, dads, families, and girlfriends were waving from a military terminal on the base. Outside the base were thousands of protesters, most of them about the same age as us young men on the plane. As I took a deep breath, preparing to get off the plane, I could hear Khrushchev's words of warning. "Your children's children will live under communism." I was a Marine first lieutenant in charge of 16 young Marines, some still teenagers. We all went over together, and we were all rotating home together. After gathering our bags, we thanked each other, hugging as we said our goodbyes. Then we ran into the military terminal to change into civilian clothes. Most of these young men had families waiting for them. It was heartwarming to mothers, fathers, wives, and children all hugging and crying. It was heartbreaking to see a few Marines crying because their wives were not there to greet them. Instead, their wives' attorneys were greeting them with divorce papers. One of the Marines met by an attorney was a friend named John. He and I were both gunship pilots and had flown together for the entire year. I left him sobbing as his wife's attorney broke the news. His wife, Pat, had moved in with another man and was filing for divorce. Welcome home. The most dangerous part of the war was next, getting through the thousands of protesters. Immediately, I was hit with a raw egg, then spit on by a young woman carrying a sign with "Baby Killers" angrily scrawled across it. It took me nearly 20 minutes to get a cab. It was a very long 20 minutes standing alone, being verbally abused and physically assaulted, pushed and shoved by hippies, men and women close to my own age. Finally, a cab got through the crowd, and I was on my way to the San Francisco airport to catch a flight to Hawaii. As the United Airlines flight crossed the Pacific, I could hear in my head the words of Nikita Khrushchev's 1959 warning. "You Americans are so gullible. No, you won't accept communism outright, but we will keep feeding you small doses of socialism until you will finally wake up and find you already have communism. Welcome home." My dad, poor dad, was at the Honolulu airport to pick me up. Mom had passed away in 1970, while I was in flight school in Pensacola, Florida. There was not much conversation as Dad drove us home. The ride home was a quiet one. The Vietnam War was unpopular at home. When I was in high school, Mom and Dad took 2 years off from their careers to join the Peace Corps, so they were not thrilled when I joined the Marine Corps. After I was at home for a few days, a local newspaper called to interview me. The reporter's angle: Ralph Kiyosaki's son returns from Vietnam. My dad was a prominent man in Hawaii, the superintendent of education. He also ran for lieutenant governor of the state of Hawaii as a Republican and was crushed. The governor blacklisted my dad from government jobs in Hawaii, and he was out of work. Forbes magazine describes Hawaii as the People's Republic of Hawaii. My dad did not have a chance running as a Republican. Hawaii leans so far to the Democratic liberal left that people have joked about being amazed that the state hasn't voted to be annexed by China. My dad was also head of the HSDA, the Hawaii State Teachers Association, the state's teachers union. Anyone who has studied Marx and his Communist Manifesto knows labor unions are Marxists. As Marx stated, workers of the world unite. You have nothing to lose but your chains. During the 2020 presidential election, the election that unseated President Donald Trump, the largest and most powerful union in America, leading the charge was the National Education Association, NEA. In 1993, Forbes magazine, which has called itself the capitalist tool, ran a series of articles, one titled, "Suffer the Little Children, How the National Education Association Corrupts Our Public Schools." The 1993 Forbes article described the NEA this way: the National Extortion Association, a bare-knuckles labor union eager to use fraud and coercion to serve no interest but its own. The article also stated, the NEA's rise is directly linked to the 30-year decline of American education that occurred simultaneously, not just in terms of quality, but especially in terms of quantity. Education's crushing and incessantly accumulating cost. On February 15, 2021, the American Conservative ran an article entitled, "Teachers' Unions Have Always Been Terrible." The article states, the behavior of teachers' unions during this pandemic confirms the nickname that Forbes magazine gave the NEA in the 1990s, the National Extortion Association. This latest betrayal of American students is no surprise, considering the union's long history of sabotaging learning. Since the 1970s, the National Education Association has been the leading advocate of no-fault teaching. Whatever happens, don't blame the teacher. Unions have launched strikes to prevent parental interference in public education. The Chicago Tribune concluded in 1988 that the Chicago Teachers Association has as much control over operations of the public schools as the Chicago Board of Education, and more control than is available to principals, parents, taxpayers, and voters. The NEA represents teachers and other education professionals. The NEA is the largest labor union in the United States, with nearly 3 million members. The NEA claims to be an advocate for education professionals and a force to unite its members to fulfill the promise of public education. That is not my experience. When I was in high school, my dad would hold teachers' union meetings for union leaders in our home. Although I was only a teenager, I knew the teachers' union was not about improving education. All the NEA cares about, from my experience, is money and power, supporting Marx's proclamation, "Workers of the world unite. You have nothing to lose but your chains." In 1963, when I was in high school, rich dad hotel and restaurant workers went on strike. The workers went on strike demanding they be allowed to join a union. My rich dad called and asked if I would come to the hotel and work the front desk, filling in to check tourists in and out. I worked the front desk for 3 days, taking naps in the linen closet. When I returned home, my poor dad was extremely upset, calling me a scab, a traitor, for crossing the picket lines. In 1969, the year I graduated from Kings Point, the U.S. Merchant Marine Academy, I refused to join the MMP, the labor union for merchant ship officers, masters, mates, and pilots. I refused to join because I am not a Marxist. In 1969, I joined the Marine Corps to fight Marxists in Vietnam. In 1973, returning from Vietnam, memories of crossing the picket lines at Rich Dad's hotel came rushing back as I pushed my way through thousands of hippies and anti-war protesters. I rode home from the airport with poor Dad in virtual silence because we were on opposite sides of the Vietnam War and Marxist philosophy. It was a day I will never forget. My dad, mom, and my 2 sisters were anti-war protesters. My younger brother joined the Air Force. We both fought in Vietnam. In 2020, my brother and I both supported Trump. My sisters hated Trump and voted for Biden. In November of 2020, Dominion Voting Systems Corporation became a controversial topic amid allegations of voter fraud in the U.S. presidential election. Joseph Stalin is often credited with these words: "It's not the people who vote that count. It's the people who count the votes." And Hitler, who warned, "It's not truth that matters but victory." In 2020, The people who voted for Biden did not care if the election was fair. In 2020, few people cared that Hitler had warned. If you tell a big enough lie and tell it frequently enough, it will be believed. And that Hitler also said, how fortunate for government that the people they administer don't think. In 2021, Republicans ordered a recount of the presidential election ballots in Arizona, an investigation into the charges of voter fraud. That investigation is still ongoing. When I arrived home from Vietnam in 1973, I was interviewed by a local Hawaii radio station. It was the first time in my life that I had ever been asked for an interview. When the reporter asked, "What did you learn in Vietnam?" I replied, if I wanted to kill commies, I should have stayed home and fired a few bursts in City Hall. I'm thankful that interview was never released for broadcast. As Jack Nicholson, who played Marine Corps Colonel Frank Jessup in the movie A Few Good Men, said, "You want the truth? You can't handle the truth." That line became an instant classic, permanently etched in American culture. Question: are you saying Marx's Communist Manifesto is infiltrating America via our educational system, via our teachers? Are you saying we can't handle the truth? Hey, that's a question you should answer for yourself. And right now the subject of what's being taught in our schools is a hot topic. Many concerned parents are asking hard questions and demanding answers. As Albert Einstein said, whoever is careless with the truth in small matters cannot be trusted in important affairs. Nikita Khrushchev's 1959 warning bears repeating. Your children's children will live under communism. You Americans are so gullible. No, you won't accept communism outright, but we will keep feeding you small doses of socialism until you will finally wake up and find you already have communism. We will not have to fight you. We will so weaken your economy until you will fall like overripe fruit into our hands. Emphasis added. In 2020, COVID-19 shut down the economy. It's been like hitting pause, giving us a chance to slow down, step back, and ask ourselves lots of questions. Some of the most important ones, in my opinion, are Americans gullible? Have we been fed small doses of socialism? And are we finally waking up and finding out that communism has already taken root? Is America's free enterprise capitalist system about to fall like overripe fruit? Have our schools been teaching Marxism? Are we woke? Are we, to quote a published definition, aware of and actively attentive to important facts and issues, especially issues of racial and social justice? And if Marx's Communist Manifesto is being taught in our schools, mainlined like an opioid into our children's veins by the NEA, the most powerful labor union in America, what can we do about it? That's the question. What can we do about it? In 2021, parents are stepping up and stepping in to voice their discontent and are being labeled as domestic terrorists. On October 6, 2021, the New American reported that, until very recently, it would have been unimaginable that the U.S. government would ever consider as domestic terrorist parents who dare to protest against the numerous destructive policies of local school boards. Yet what was until recently unimaginable has now become reality with the Biden administration, and it is not surprising that the administration's outlandish stance is drawing enormous public outrage. According to a memorandum released on Monday, Attorney General Merrick Garland has instructed the Federal Bureau of Investigation, FBI, to mobilize against parents who oppose critical race theory, CRT, in public schools, citing threats against the school board members and teachers who participate in the vital work of running our nation's public schools. Writes Garland, the department takes these incidents seriously and is committed to using its authority and resources to discourage these threats, identify them when they occur, and prosecute them when appropriate. On October 5, 2021, the National Review reported, Attorney General Merrick Garland has directed the FBI and U.S. Attorney's offices to investigate alleged threats being made against school board officials by a growing coalition of parents who are outraged by the imposition of racialized curricula and COVID-driven shutdowns and mask mandates in their local classrooms. The order, announced in a memo released Monday, comes after a group that represents school boards urged the Biden administration to review whether confrontations by outraged parents over COVID restrictions and critical race theory violate the Patriot Act. Capitalist tools. In 1996, Kim and I produced a cash flow board game, and in 1997, Rich Dad, Poor Dad was self-published because every publisher in New York turned the book down. The cash flow board game and Rich Dad, Poor Dad were our original capitalist tools. They were created to combat communism taught in our schools by teaching capitalism in our homes. As Marx warned, the education of all children, from the moment that they can get along without, a mother's care shall be in state institutions. As Lenin warned, give me your 4-year-olds, and in a generation I will build a socialist state. As Stalin warned, education is a weapon whose effects depends upon who holds it in his hands and at whom it is aimed. And as Hitler warned, universal education is the most corroding and disintegrating poison that liberalism has ever invented for its own destruction. He is also credited with saying, "Let me control the textbook, and I will control the state." This book, Capitalist Manifesto, is about how to take back control of our education, our economy, our country, and most importantly, our freedoms.